So excited to welcome our next guest to Off the Podium today, returning to the great sport of cross-country skiing. She is a two-time Olympian, having competed in Pyeongchang in 2018 and earlier this year in Beijing, where she actually created history for Australia, finishing the highest ever individual position of an Australian cross-country skier, where she finished 31st in the skiathlon. We're going to learn a little bit more about that and everything else in between in her great career. Please welcome to Off the Podium, Jessica Yeaton. Jess, first of all, pleasure to have you here on Off the Podium. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's always exciting to chat to any Olympian on this show, but I've never hidden the fact that I'm a bit more of a winter fanboy on this program. We spoke to your teammate, Casey Wright, just before Beijing, and now we're here several months removed, of course, from Beijing. First of all, congratulations on your performances. Have you sort of settled down, gotten back into normal life? I can imagine it's so much prep going into an Olympics, and then all of a sudden they're done and you got to get back to normal life. So how's that all been for you in the months that have happened since Beijing?
Yeah, it's been wild, I guess. I kind of jumped straight back into things. So I'm in the US. I'm studying physiotherapy. So I kind of had a bit of a break after Beijing. Like I maybe had four or 5 weeks or something to get everything together. And then I jumped back into clinical placements and training and whatnot. And I didn't really feel like I had a time to come down. I did a couple more races, but I kind of feel like when you're just always kind of getting after things, it's a little easier because you don't have time to process it. So that's a bit of my approach to life, I guess. But sometimes I do wish there was a bit more downtime, I guess.
Must be such an interesting feeling because, obviously, as I said, we spoke to Casey just before the Olympics and now it's sort of that period afterwards. And we've had a couple of athletes who competed in Beijing since. And I don't know, do you miss kind of that real, I guess, drive going into an Olympics and all that pressure that leads up to it? Or is it a case of you love every second of an after an Olympics because it's maybe the one rare time you really do get a chance to kind of put your hair up for a little bit at least and kind of relax before getting back into that next cycle if you move on, of course?
Yeah, no, I don't miss it at all, actually. I don't love the pressure leading into it. I really love the training. I actually don't mind the racing, racing in itself, but I despise the pressure. And I think it is good because it kind of fuels you and you obviously have goals and goals are great, but in itself, I find that very stressful. And I wouldn't say I'm the person that craves added stress, but obviously we have these goals and the Olympics is worth it. So you kind of put up with it, but I think it feels really good to be done. And to I'm still going to train lots and focus towards future things, but it's not that layer of stress you have where it's all or nothing for the Olympics. So I'm pretty happy right now, kind of afterwards, just focusing on other things just because it is a lot of stress.
I love your story into the sport because you're obviously born in Perth. You moved to Texas at 2, you moved to Dubai at 6, and then you moved to Alaska at 12. Now, I read this was because your dad's job. Was your dad a secret agent? What did your dad do? I'm intrigued why you move around so much. Yeah, you're allowed to tell me today, Jess.
No, he wishes he was a secret agent. He was a meteorologist for ConocoPhillips for oil. He worked in oil. So he lived in, I think he moved to Australia I don't know, way back when, in the 80s or something, and 70s. But the office closed down in Perth, and so that's why we ended up coming back to the US. But he's American, he's from New Jersey. So my mom's Australian. Most of my family is in Perth. So kind of an interesting upbringing because I probably wouldn't have gotten into skiing at all had I lived in Australia because I would have lived in Perth. So so it is kind of interesting because, not many of us, I guess we have another athlete on the team whose family's from Perth, Lars, and he's similar to me where he grew up overseas, but his family's from there, but everyone else is kind of not from that area. So
yeah, it's sort of not the winter hotbed. Generally everyone's sort of Victorian or New South Wales, right? It's kind of not exactly a lot of snow in Perth, really, is there?
No, in fact, someone actually said to me, it was when I was 19 or something, they were it was actually the coach of the Australian team at the time. He was an American, and he was "Are you actually Australian?" And I was yeah. And there's a ski team. And I was no, I didn't. Because when I go to Australia, I'm at the beach the whole time. I had no idea. So That was kind of my introduction to it, I guess.
Because you were 12, I believe, when you were in Alaska when you really got
Yeah.
into skiing. So sort of in the lead up to that, were you doing lots of other sports as a child, sort of in between? What sort of other sports were you taking part in?
I mean, I grew up swimming, as you do. My mom had me in the water really young, so I was swim team. And then I kind of like drifted into more endurance sports. I did a lot of cycling, so I raced like road cycling, a little bit of mountain biking, did a bit of triathlon, always was running. Mostly competitive in cycling though. And then I kind of shifted to skiing, I guess around like when I was 15 or so. I just decided it was like my thing. And that kind of just decided to keep pursuing it in different avenues. So like at the collegiate level here in the US, and then kind of wanted to shift, like continue pursuing that after I graduated. And so that was kind of when I ended up just started skiing internationally at the World Cup and things like that.
So when you were doing those sports growing up before you transitioned into skiing, was something like the Olympics always a dream? Was that something you looked towards with some of those sports that you were competing in?
Like a little bit with cycling, maybe like for a while, but to be honest, it always felt like something was very like far off for me. Like that was, yes, it was a dream, but if you had told me, if you went back and told like my 12-year-old self, I would have been like, no way. So it's pretty cool. I mean, I think you get like accustomed to it, but then when you do have that perspective on it, it's pretty crazy to think that, you know, you've had those opportunities and were able to achieve that. So.
And with the skiing aspect, you mentioned sort of endurance. So was Nordic always the preferred skiing discipline? Did you try a hand at Alpine and freestyle and realize that Nordic was the one for you?
Yeah, so I actually like I remember I'd been in Alaska for like 2 weeks and we went downhill skiing, my first time skiing. And I just like couldn't even get down the hill. It was horrendous. I remember just being like it was back when I like snowboard. I remember as a 12-year-old I thought snowboarding was way cooler. So I ditched that and did snowboarding for a while, and then I don't know, yeah, just sort of got into actually my mom completely drugged me out on these Nordic adventures. Like I remember just being like, why are we doing this? It's horrible, it's hard. I hate it. And I don't know, somehow it just grows on you. I think I just gravitate towards the stuff that's a little more like cardio based. But then I ended up going back and I sort of stopped snowboarding and just drifted towards all these other sports. And that's kind of when I got more involved in triathlon and cycling and running and things. And then I remember when I was like 18, I went back and downhill skied and I was like, wow, this is a lot easier than the last time I tried it. I don't know if there's like a coordination crossover, but I also thought it was way easier than snowboarding. I was like, why did I even try snowboarding? So I'm always really impressed by people that snowboard because I think skiing is easier, but I don't know. Maybe it depends.
I like that. I hope our snowboarders are listening to this right now.
Yeah.
And, you know,
well, I don't know. There might be like much more in common than I think between like cross country skiing and skiing. But I just was like, oh my gosh, how did I find this so hard when I was 12? But anyway.
And when you sort of make that, you know, decision that you're going to stick to the Nordic discipline, is it a case then of, I like cross country because I then don't have to shoot every certain distance, or I'm not going to add ski jumping to it. You know, you don't go Nordic combined or biathlon, and because you think, oh no, cross country's fine, we don't need to add an extra layer of difficulty to this.
Totally. Well, I mean, ski jumping just sounds like the most terrifying thing ever. So that's out. Shooting a gun, never tried it. I don't know. Kind of have this feeling I'd be really bad at it. Never liked ball sports too much. So those are out. And then, yeah, I guess like, I don't know, like the downhill aspect, I've just always been more of an uphill person. So at the end of the day, that's kind of like, yeah, I think you gravitate towards what you're good at. And I never found myself particularly gifted at things that were like extreme activities or like that kind of stuff. Although I did do a bit of gymnastics growing up too. I'd throw that in there. So maybe I could have done like aerials or something. No, I don't know. I was
going to say the transition from gymnastics into cross country. I don't see, I mean, aerials, yes. But start a trend there perhaps. What do you think it was about sort of endurance-based sports that drew you to it? Was it the challenge of it? Did you sort of feel that physically you were better suited to those kind of sports?
Yeah, I think it's just you like, you know, when you're young, you kind of want to do things like you're good at. And I remember I didn't really didn't train for running that much. And I was like, wow, like these cross country races, I did pretty well. And I think I'm just more, maybe like my body is a little more endurance wired. So those things come like more naturally to me. So I think you just, when you want to do what you're a little better at, I guess. And so that's kind of how it's always been for me. I never felt like I excelled. Like I remember playing like soccer and things like that as a kid, and I was like, wow, I'm terrible at this. And so I didn't particularly like, other than the social aspect, I didn't really want to do it. So I think that's just most of what it is. But you just get like addicted to endorphins and the feeling and like pushing yourself. And now it's just like, I can't imagine doing anything else or not having that in my life. So.
What's the collegiate system like for cross-country skiing, particularly in Alaska? I can imagine that's an interesting part in itself, given the distance to the mainland US. I mean, sort of when you start progressing through the ranks, how is that coming up through the collegiate system in the US and then making your way to these international competitions?
So I actually raced, I went to a school in Montana when I was racing collegiatit's kind of a cool system because it's a way, you're on this team and it's really fun, but you're also studying and there's scholarships, and it's a really good way to kind of like pursue education and skiing at the same time. But it's also a very high level, which is great because you get really good racing experience. And there's a lot of international athletes like Norwegians and Swedish people that will come over and be racing, and they've maybe like, there's a lot of athletes that were maybe like on the Norwegian national team or something and kind of phased out a little. So they're still really, really good, but they're looking for something a little extra. And it makes the level really, really high. And so it's really great preparation for like other international competitions. So I feel like in my journey, it played a really big role just in like development of like racing and like learning racing skills and learning training and like learning how to push yourself and things like that. And so it really prepared me well for when I was like fully transitioning to international racing.
And when you make that transition, given you're born in Australia, you're raised in the US, you've got an American dad, I'm assuming you would have dual citizenship. Do you have to make the decision at a certain point, like I want to compete for Australia, I want to compete for the US, and how do you make that decision?
Yeah, so I guess in 2014, you have to switch your FIS license over basically. And it's pretty easy for me because I'm a dual citizen. So it just like, I didn't have to get citizenship or anything like that. I think the process would be a little harder if you were pursuing your different nation's passport first, I guess. But it's pretty simple from that standpoint. And that's just something I wanted to do to kind of like, I guess for me, it opened up a lot of opportunities. I could pursue all of this as a US athlete, but, and like, no one would be like, oh, like, what are you doing kind of thing. But it just is a little more opportunity from the international competition standpoint. So that's why I initially did it. And
is that, because I don't know how much time you would have spent in Australia growing up. I don't know if like it was a case of you come back every year or something like that. But I mean, given that obviously I can imagine you're very tied to the US, but you've obviously got those ties to Australia. So was that a tricky decision to be able to have to, I'm not to say turn your back on the US, but I mean, you're sort of competing for a different country when you're spending a lot of the time in a different country, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it wasn't actually tricky for me at all because I feel like my entire life I've had this weird as a kid I would always go back like the entire summer I'd spend there, and my entire family basically is in Australia. I don't really have that much family in the US, and so people ask me where home is to me a lot, and it's a really tricky question for me to answer. It always has been. I've never felt, even now when I say I'm from Alaska or something, because usually that's like the simplest thing in the US, I don't feel like I'm from Alaska. Like you always have a really big part of where you grew up, and to me that's not, that's the first part of your life that's completely unrelated to Alaska. And so I hate answering that question. And at the root of things, I feel Australian, even though I don't sound like it or I maybe haven't spent time there. So for me, it was like this really cool opportunity to have ties to like actually something that's really important to me, because I've always felt like 50-50. But I think it's really hard when, you're like, well, I live somewhere and I sound a certain way, but it doesn't make you like, I guess, doesn't necessarily mean that's like what you are like most tied to, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll test it right now, particularly being from Perth. West Coast or Fremantle?
Frio.
Oh, there you go. All right, good. Yeah. That's a good answer. I'll say that one there. I don't go for either, but like I'm not a West Coast fan, so I'll just kind of push that there. But so when it comes to the Australian cross country scene? Because I think when we talked to Casey before Beijing, and it's fascinating to see the amount of athletes that obviously the cross-country team has going into an Olympics, and it seems to be that one sport going into any Winter Olympics where Australians every time go, oh, we have a lot of cross-country skiers. This is unusual. So, I mean, the team itself seems to be quite well off in the fact of the athletes. So is it a case of the scene in Australia for cross-country skiing, you know, when you are there competing for Australia, that it's a lot more, I guess what I'm trying to say, stacked, and there's a lot more athletes out there competing on the world stage than I guess a lot of people in Australia even realise?
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty crazy. We have a pretty big team and there's a lot of juniors racing. I think people are always surprised when I tell them like how many people are on the team. And we actually had a really competitive group of girls like this year. It's not like you just, yeah, there's tons of people and that was what made things really stressful this year. It was like there was, 5 or 6 girls trying for 2 Olympic spots. Like we don't have as many spots as other nations, and there's actually quite a few girls that are pretty competitive. So I think people are always really surprised. I was surprised by it. I had no idea there were so many people pursuing the sport, but it's really cool because there's actually a lot of opportunity as an Australian, I think, if you're able to, because there's this whole Australian winter, and then you can go and, I guess you don't get much summer is the downside, but you could spend a lot of time on snow if you're able to go over and spend the season in Europe or something like that in the winter, or the European winter. So
is that a case because when it comes to cross country, you don't need a very steep downhill, or you don't need moguls, you don't need like a ramp, like it's a case of where the skiing facilities are in Australia, you generally maybe have a bit more access for cross country rather than some of the other skiing disciplines?
Yeah, I think so, actually. Like I'm even recently here because I'm in Park City right now, and I guess it's like one of the only places you can do aerials because they have like the water pool and stuff. Because I was talking to some athletes about that, and I was like, wow, that must be really tricky because you just don't have that opportunity, or it's like ski jumping and things like that. Like, yeah. I've never really thought of it that way, but yeah, with cross country, like, in the winter you can really go wherever. Doesn't really matter. Like you'll have different snow conditions and different, like maybe you want to be training in a place where the terrain's a little more suited to a certain way or whatever. Like, sometimes the snow in certain areas is a little more powdery versus wet or whatever, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You can still train the same. So it really doesn't matter. So training in Australia is actually awesome because you get a ton of experience with sort of like that wetter snow and like skiing and like trickier conditions, honestly. So it's actually a great place for practice. It's more like skiing on the glacier, which a lot of the US teams will do. And so it's like people actually seek out that kind of terrain in the summer to train in the off season, I guess.
And trip to Australia, no one's really going to say no to that, right? So
exactly. No, and a lot of them go to New Zealand, and I don't know why.
Yeah, we've always asking that question, right? Come on, why New Zealand? Stop it.
It's like, what the heck? I'm like, heard it's really windy, so. No.
Which, you mentioned ski jumping. I always like bringing this up. Australia, the only winter sport we've never had an athlete in is ski jumping. So if you ever decide to make that transition, Jess, you could create history maybe in Milan as Australia's first ever Olympic ski jumper.
It's tempting, but terrifying.
Well, you've got, 3.5 years? So, a bit of...
I could probably nail it by then. Can't be that hard. Kind of like jump
surely.
Off.
I watched Eddie the Eagle. It's not that hard. Yeah,
you can do it. You give it a go.
I'm very tempted because as a Tasmanian, we're the only state or territory to never have had a winter athlete ever. So I could two things at once. The first Tasmanian Winter Olympian and the first Australian ski jumper. So,
Yeah.
Create history.
Yeah, there you go.
It doesn't help that I'm an absolute wimp and I lasted about 30 seconds on skis the one time I tried it. So, it might have to try and work on some of that essentially gradually.
I was going to say there's actually a new sport next Olympics, like skimo. Have you heard of it?
Yes, Which
I'm more likely to do that than probably ski jumping. So we could get in it together if you wanted.
We could, exactly. I'm so fascinated to see this sport because from what I've read about it, I'm like, this sounds amazing. So,
the thing about it is that the downhills are tough and that might be a bit of a stretch for me, but like you really just are going straight uphill and that's like my alley, and so I think I could maybe compensate for it. So
Well, I mean, you were up. That's the difficult part, right? Surely you just have to just go, oh, cool, I'm going down now. Slide on
just
your way.
make them straight, right?
Exactly. I like that thinking. Which, so you mentioned sort of it's around 2014 then when you're sort of competing internationally. Was this just after Sochi? I mean, was there any realistic chance you could have gone to Sochi with that sort of period where you were competing?
So if I had learned it, like I just didn't realize that I could be competing for Australia. And so if I had kind of made that realization like a year earlier, I could have. But it was like with the license change, it didn't work for me to try to qualify. So which was fine. Yeah.
I was going to say, is that difficult, kind of knowing that you're that close, or is it a case of you would rather have that extra time so that when you are able to go towards an Olympics, you're maybe better prepared rather than just making up the numbers?
I felt that way. And I also felt like a little weird about it. Like I wanted to spend time like with the team and kind of integrating as well. Like I felt a little weird just like switching my license and like being like here, so, like I'm going to try to qualify for the Olympics. Like it was better the way I did it because I felt like I spent like a couple of years traveling with the team and like really getting to know all the athletes. And like you also like there's a level of just international experience, like, and it's very, very intimidating at first. And I think I would have just like it would have been quite scary just going to the Olympics that first year. So I think I'm glad that it was the way it was. So.
And does that spur you on then more as well to have that extra time that, you know, everything you just said to push towards the goal of then making Pyeongchang?
Yeah, I think so. Like it was definitely always this goal on the horizon. Like, and then you had more time to train for it. So I was training with a team in Alaska at that time. And we had like some of the best US skiers. Like one of them won gold in whatever the last Olympics was, Pyeongchang. And we had a couple like world championship medals. So I always had like this group of really motivated, really fast girls to train with. And it was just like this whole time I had this goal. I don't know. It was just like a really great lead into it, I think. And it just, I think I was better prepared because of it.
And do you remember then that moment sort of through everything in that period when it got closer to 2018? Do you remember the moment of qualification that when you had been tapped on the shoulder or given the phone call or the email, however it was, when it was like, cool, Jess, guess what? By the way, you're going to the Olympics. Do you remember that sort of feeling when that came about?
Yeah, I do actually, because we were all staying together in Switzerland, in Davos, Switzerland. And it was like, it was the same this time around because even when you kind of know you might be going to, it's like, until it's official, it's not like official. So you're all like kind of a little bit stressed, but I actually had like kind of a hard time. The criteria were like, I had an easier time qualifying this past time, I guess. And so I was a little stressed that first time. And I remember like, being just so relieved over the whole thing. And just excited.
Which this is what I love about winter sports is that you basically, a lot of sports are not 100% guaranteed to go until almost like 2 weeks before the games. Like, I mean, so many of these summer athletes are qualifying like 18 months out. Like, good for them. They can just chill and relax. Whereas, you know, I think there are even some with like a week before the Olympics, you don't know you're going. So, and also with the criteria, like you've got a quota, but then you've got to meet the criteria to get, like, it's all very stressful, I can imagine. It's sort of, do we need to make it simpler for our winter athletes, Jess?
Yeah, it was actually really stressful this year. I personally wasn't that stressed because we have a tiered qualification system. And so there is like objective criteria and I had met them. And so it was kind of like this year was fine, but we didn't get the official nod till like, no joke, 10 days before. And It was a bit of a stressful thing for a couple of athletes. I'm like, it was kind of just like, this isn't fair. They shouldn't be allowed to do this. Like they should have to tell you a lot. There's also like family members are wondering, and I know other teams were making announcements and like we were waiting to make announcements, and it was just like, I was just kind of, it was a little stressful.
And I can't imagine for the poor AOC who have to book some flights. Like, you know, the further away you book, you get cheaper flights. Poor old AOC having to book last minute flights to frickin' China. Come on.
No, you start booking the flights now for the next one.
Exactly. Get them going. Which I love asking this question when it comes to like a moment you feel like an Olympian, because some people it's the moment you're officially selected. Some people it's the moment you cross the finish line in your first event. Do you have sort of a moment to you back in 2018 where you felt you were an Olympian?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wouldn't say there was a moment, but if you like with that, I felt it. But if you ask me, yeah, for me, it would be like after my first race. That first Olympics was really special because I had so many family members come, and it was like, that made it like you'd finish the race and go see, like, I had seriously like cousins and like all sorts of people came from all over the world. And then you go see them and you felt like it felt more special. So for me, maybe that is what I identify as like me, like becoming an Olympian, was like going through the stands and like finding my family and like them being so excited and being like, oh my God, like you're an Olympian. And I'm like, yeah, it's really cool. But that was a little different this time around. So
because you don't know, obviously, like back then it's sort of a quote normal Olympics, whereas you don't know in 4 years time that, great, I get to go to another Olympics, but it's going to be a little bit different with sort of COVID and everything like that. But did you get to experience like opening and closing ceremonies, things like that, sort of get sort of tied up into all that kind of atmosphere during Pyeongchang?
So the Nordic girls get like, I don't know, like whoever's listening to this can like make a change, because we have the first and last event of the entire games, every single freaking game. So I got to go to the closing ceremonies in Pyeongchang, but I literally because we also race, like we started at because they do it for TV time. We started at 2:00. It's a 30K, you're kind of out for an hour and a half, and then you gotta finish the race or whatever and get back to so it takes a while. And I literally got home and had to change and 15 minutes later leave for the closing ceremonies. And
wow.
It was an hour and a half race. I remember, I think Phil or something got me I don't know, a piece of pizza from the dining hall and brought it to me. And I feel it's just and then I got so sick on the flight home because I think I was so wrecked from going out all night. But I basically barely made it to the closing ceremonies. And this last Olympics, the village, because the way the villages are, it's not like it's a small trek. So the opening ceremonies, I think they did a 10-hour day to get there. And then they really scared you. They're there's not going to be any food. You're not allowed to eat. And I had a race the next day, literally. I'm well, I'm not doing that. That's the worst idea ever. I'm going to be on my feet, not eating the day before a race. And then the closing ceremonies, again, it was I had to leave 20 minutes after the race. And then I actually had to fly out that night because there weren't that many flights to where we were going. And so I just missed everything.
Wow.
It was a bit devastating. I know. It's my sad
Jeez.
story. So whoever's in charge can try to switch the events around a bit. So
yeah, come on, Milan Cortina, if you're listening, let's make a change basically for 2026. Yeah. Which it's just because as sort of the armchair guy who will never make the Olympics, but I can dream. It's always look, I'll do everything. I'll do the opening. I do the closing. Bugger if I'm competing the next morning. I don't give a shit. Give me an hour's sleep. But again, I'm not a professional athlete, Jess, so I can make these things up in my head, and it probably doesn't make sense to most people.
Yeah, it's super tough decision because, and actually this time around it wasn't tough for me at all because I just was I'm not driving 10 hours anywhere and I'm will need to eat. That just sounded miserable. But yeah, I know the boys on the team, Phil and I know Sevi, especially Phil. Phil's dead set on. I think he's a triple Olympian. He's been to the opening and the closing every single time, and he's just no matter what, he will be there. And I'm yes, also you didn't have as bad of a situation as the girls, but I bet you if he was racing, he still would have gone. He's
wow,
the most dedicated. But it makes sense when you go. I loved the closing ceremonies. I thought it was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. I think opening ceremonies, it's a bit stressful because you're more focused on the racing and you're a little not so relaxed. But I'm very bummed about the closing because that's a really cool experience because you're totally it's all over and you're just everyone's and you're just more you're less stressed about what's to come.
Was BTS at the closing ceremony in 2018 or did they do the opening ceremony? I think they did the closing, didn't they?
In 2018.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were there.
Martin Garrix was.
But they had a K-pop section, and I'm trying to remember if BTS was in the opening or the closing back in 2018. So
before they were famous or something, because I missed.
This was right on the cusp. It was right. Yeah, so I think it was just before they made it big, but they were definitely at one of them. So you could have, if they were at the closing, you could have seen them.
I might have seen them and don't know until I'm gonna have to Google it after this conversation because
you might be oh my God, who were they? And now you realize wow, that's who they were. There you go.
Yeah. That very well could have happened, and I missed it.
Because I remember being very disappointed that Psy didn't perform. I just thought for sure that we were going to close out with Gangnam Style, but it just didn't happen. So
I know, what the heck?
yeah, I know, right? Of all the things to have, you have 5 events in 2018, which, you know, you obviously do that again in 2022. But I mentioned at the top how you hold the record for best individual performance, but also back in 2018, you were 12th with Barbara in the team sprint, which also a best record. I mean, did you leave Pyeongchang sort of, you know, satisfied with your first Olympics? Had you set yourself a goal and you would achieve those? I mean, kind of how did you leave the competition side of things feeling you had gone?
Pyeongchang, I was not, well, at the time, like I had actually a really quite good, one of the races was quite good for me. The team sprint went really well. I was happy about that. And then the 10K skate was pretty good too. But it was actually like the rest of the races I wasn't very happy with. And then the next season, like the World Championships were the next season, and I kind of wasn't even sure if I was going to keep skiing past that year, but I skied the next year anyway because it was World Champs, and I actually had like the best season of my life by a landslide. And I was like, oh man, like I need to ski another 3 years for the Olympics. And I think at that point, I kind of was disappointed in how my Olympics had gone just because I skied so much faster a year later. Like if I had skied that well at the Olympics, it would have looked really good. And I was like, dang, I need to do this next time. So I feel like I was happy, but then in retrospect, I'm not, if that makes sense.
Which I mean, I can imagine it's kind of one of those things as an athlete where, particularly Olympic athletes, where you have that 4-year cycle to try and peak to get those performances in Olympics, because that's when the world's watching. But, you know, sometimes it falls a bit strange where it goes into that off cycle, as you're sort of saying there. So, I mean, is there a way that you can kind of channel that to try and make sure that it happens in the right year rather than one of the off years that's not an Olympic year, if that makes sense?
Yeah, there definitely is. Like you just try to nail your training down, and that's something I tried to do this past year, but it's just like always easier said than done. And I think there's a level, for me at least, there's a level of like stress involved, and like they always make this saying, it's like the happy skier is a fast skier, and I feel like sometimes just like the stress of like Olympics and like high stakes competitions and like just all of that kind of takes away from it for me, which is a bummer. But I think most of it's just dialing in like your training and things like that. So yeah, I think you can there's definitely control of it. I think I changed my training quite a bit like after the first Olympics, and that maybe contributed to it too. So
Just quickly before I go on to the next question, just on a side note, back to BTS, because I was fascinated by this too, Jess. So I will correct myself. They didn't perform. They were asked to, but they had to decline. At the closing ceremony, you would have been witness to South Korean singer and rapper CL, as well as the group EXO, which I got confused with EXO over BTS, and then Martin Garrix performed at the end there. So apologies to our BTS fans who are probably screaming, going, Ben, you're wrong, come on, you got to know everything about BTS. But apparently we're invited, but had to decline. So
that's
sad.
a bummer to decline. That would have been very cool to see that.
There it is. You mentioned about possibly giving up the sport. What was it that kind of maybe sort of led you to possibly not going on to Beijing and maybe hanging up the skis sort of after 2018?
I just didn't feel like, I don't know. I was applying to physio school at the time, and I felt like it was too much to keep doing that and skiing. And I think that was part of it. But then once I got there, I kind of realized that I could keep training pretty well. And so that was part of it. But I think a lot of the reason was just like the motivation from how fast I'd skied. So no matter what, I made it happen. So even though I was way, way busier, like in the back of my head, I was like, you can, you need to ski at the next Olympics because like, I want to be able to like perform well as I had been. And so even if it was a bit difficult at the time, I was just really motivated. So it was mostly just knowing that I was kind of having a shift of like less focus on like maybe a traditional full-time training route. And I was like taking on doing a bit more training on my own and like working around the school schedule and stuff like that. So I was just like, well, maybe this won't work, but I just kind of was determined to make it happen then.
Because I can imagine it's that balance, because I think, particularly for Australian winter athletes where, you're not Ariane Titmus, a swimmer who's going to get, Harvey Norman endorsements and that's going to be your career. You've got to obviously think about, post-athletic career and your studies and all that kind of stuff. So it is that balance of setting yourself up for life or a career as well as that athletic career as well. And I can imagine, particularly as you're saying, training, studying, it's tricky. And sometimes you've just really got to think about what's going to be best for you for the future, I can imagine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of, it's like you said, like if you're not at high level, you're not like, there's a lot of skiers that are not just ski racing. Like most people are pursuing education, or I've always worked as well, I've worked in coffee for ages. And then, just that, but I kind of value that because you want to have something else. And it's like, there's that added layer of stress when that's all you have. It almost like, like if you have a bad race or something, you're like, well, it's okay. Like I have a lot going on otherwise, and like a career and like that kind of thing. It's really stressful if you feel like you've put everything into skiing. That's all you have. And then you're like slow. It's like, well, shoot, like, I don't know. It's kind of nice in a way, but it does make it, there's that other aspect of like, well, maybe you need to put 150% in and you can't focus on anything else to be as good as you want to be. But I don't know. There's a balance point, I think, and everyone's different. So. You
mentioned coffee, being a barista. Looking through your Instagram a little bit and also reading up a bit, you're a bit of a latte art fan. So is this something that, you just got that passion for when you're working as a barista? And is it something you still like to do, kind of perfect the latte art?
I guess I don't do it much anymore because I don't have the opportunity, sadly, because I don't have an espresso machine. But yes, I think the job is quite boring without that. It's so funny because like the coffee shops where they just put a lid on it, I'm like, gosh, that would and they just pour it and they don't do anything. I would have quit ages ago because it's like the only entertaining part. Now I love talking to like patient or clients and things like I'm thinking of clients right now, customers, and that aspect of it. But yes, it's fun to work on because it's not always the most thrilling otherwise. So it was cool to perfect that skill. My parents have an espresso machine, so whenever I'm there, I'll work on it.
You just go to town.
I'm just like, who needs a latte? Just making them all day. And they're like, okay, we're over it. But yeah, it's really fun for me. So I definitely
What's the best one you've ever done? And is there also one that it's the granddaddy of latte art that you really want to get to one day?
Yeah, look, I've mostly been like perfecting like really good tulips, so like layers of tulips, so you try and get like where it's like there's like 12 layer tulips or whatever, but I didn't really like some people are really good at the swan. Wouldn't say that's like my strong point, but I haven't done much of the stenciling either. Like people will do, like I've always done just free pours, but some people will take like the thermometer or whatever and then like stencil in eyes and make like a dolphin, and I'm just like, that's too much. too fancy. Mind blown, like, yeah, so like I guess if I got into it again I could try focusing.
Do they do like Olympic rings in the Olympic Village? Like are there baristas there trying to be all like, oh, look at it, I've got Olympic rings for your latte?
Well, so we did at the last Olympics, we had a barista who came with us and it was awesome. So they had like our in-house latte.
So it actually came with you. So this is like an Australian AOC designated barista. Wow.
He was like hired to be there as the barista. Like it was crazy. So he was there. It was awesome. It was like genuinely, people were so jealous too. I had like teammate or like friends from the US being like, do you think you can bring me a latte? I can't. Yeah, so he never did Olympic rings and, I should have asked. So
yeah, really geez. I thought that'd be like the one, job description to being the AOC barista. You have to do Olympic rings.
We should have had like a whole like hiring process. No, he was great. You can't hate on him at all. So
no, that's something to strive for our baristas. You can go to the Olympics as a barista, like just So was Team USA didn't have one? Was this just a purely Australian thing?
Yeah, we had Team Australia had it dialed. So we had our own. Like the dining hall wasn't great there. And like, I never, to be honest, I think I had like one meal there, or I'd walk through and grab like, they had little phones, like you could grab like to-go ice creams. And we went and had KFC one night too. That was pretty good. Like I think after one of the races, but.
So KFC, but no McDonald's, because we lost McDonald's, didn't we? So.
Yeah, no, they had like, did you see they had like the cubicle things set up?
Yeah, yeah.
like, I don't know, it was pretty stressful with COVID at first because you didn't want to get it because you didn't want to go into like isolation or something. So the Australian team just had our own like setup with food. And I think they initially had anticipated that like not everyone would eat there, but the food was way better and like it was really convenient and you weren't going to get COVID. So I basically like, we just ate every meal at at our team building, whatever it's called. So where was I going with this? What were we talking about? Oh yes, we also had the latte situation going. And other nations, like I have a lot of friends on the US team and they were just like, we're dying, we haven't eaten at the food hall and it's like really bad food and I guess they had some breakfast options, but it was things like they only had skim milk. Just like really, they're just like, it's terrible. So we were so lucky. It was like the greatest thing. And it also just made it like, I don't know, it was like more fun. And it was kind of a team environment. Like, I think we had a nutritionist who was initially like doing most of the cooking, but it became such a big operation that like physios were helping. And it was like this big team effort to make these meals. And it was pretty cool. I think we had it better than the other teams. So
basically through all of that, Brisbane 2032 is going to be the best cooking experience ever in an Olympic Village because we're just practicing for the next 10 years, clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. That's insane. I love learning these things like that. Before Beijing, in that period, two big events that you took part in that you won. On the skiing side of things, you won the Birkebeiner American big race, the biggest cross-country race in the US, which I believe you are the only non-European / North American to ever win. And you also won the Mount Marathon event as well, which is a mountain running event. So give us a bit of an insight into these. I mean, first of all, the Birkebeiner, I mean, from what I've been reading and looking up on this is an amazing event. I mean, what was it like to win that?
That was really cool, actually. Probably the coolest thing of my athletic career, I'd say. So it's like a 50K and it's, quite a large race, but also has like quite a bit of prize money. So that was really great. And that's kind of why I went. Like, well, this could be cool. Like, maybe I'll win a bit of money, like not thinking I would win it. But it was really interesting because it was when I was at my peak busyness in school and like I had an exam, like I think the race was on a Saturday. I had an exam on the Friday morning that I couldn't get out of. And so I asked the professor basically I said, well, can I leave right after the exam and just like, I'll, catch up on whatever I miss for the rest of the day another time, but I'll take the test. And so I flew, like I got on a plane, traveled like 12 hours, but like was kind of like, normally the day before a race, you go for a ski and you like rest and it's like very like methodical and like whatever. And I just didn't even do any of that. I had sent my skis with someone else so that they would wax them so they'd be ready for me. Didn't preview the course or anything. I was kind of like running through the airport to like keep my legs from like stiffening up because I had like it was like 2 flights plus like a 4.5-hour drive or something or ridiculous. So I got in at like 10 p.m. had to get up at like 6 for this race. And I just was like, this will probably be a disaster, like likely will be a disaster. And, it was like the best race of my life. So it was cool because it was like, like the coolest race to win. And then on top of that, it like teaches you this lesson of that, like, you don't have to do things perfectly to succeed. And sometimes maybe doing things quote unquote perfectly is not perfect. And I think that has been something like that lesson alone. It's like, when you're having like a day before a race where you're like, oh no, things are not going like my way. And like, this is really stressful or that kind of thing. Like I think about that and I'm like, no, it doesn't need to be this like perfect situation. And like, you don't need to do everything a certain way. And like, I think that's been a really cool lesson to learn. So that's maybe why it was like the most special thing for me to win. But I
was going to say, maybe you did need to go to the opening ceremony then in Beijing to kind of go through all that and just wake up the next morning and like, just bugger it. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. But I really don't like long car. I would have gotten car sick. So they like make the buses really hot and you're just kind of like die.
Yeah.
Not like an experience sitting on like transportation. That's different. I'd rather go for a ski. So
simple. So the Mount Marathon race itself. So this obviously isn't a skiing race. This is mountain running. So I mean, tell us a little bit about that one and what was it like to win that.
That was really cool too. It's like this really epic race in Alaska. So basically you go up this, it's not a marathon. The name of the mountain is Mount Marathon. But it's in a place called Seward, Alaska. It's very cool. You should go there if you ever go to Alaska. But it's like on the ocean, and then there's basically this giant mountain that comes out of the ocean. And you run up, and it's really cool because you can actually like, stand on the street and kind of see everyone running up.
Wow.
And I think it goes, I don't know how high it goes actually, but it takes about, I want to say it's like 3,000 feet of vertical. So I don't know what that is in meters. I only know this because everyone has these stickers in Alaska that like literally on their bumpers on their cars, it's like 3,200 feet or whatever, like means that you made it up Mount Marathon.
Right.
Yeah. So anyways, you go to the top and then you like run back down, but it's really epic because it's like so steep in areas that you're like literally like climbing. And so then on the way down, it's like, so the guys, like the fastest men go up in like 30 minutes and then they come down in like 8 or 9 minutes. That's how fast you're like flying down this thing. It's scary. Like the top of the mountain's shale. So you're basically like, as you step into the shale, it like you slide down it and then you actually, there's snow at the top. So you like can just like slide on your butt down. It's kind of crazy.
So
and then
almost like skeleton on the way back down then. It's a luge basically.
Yeah, there's snow at the top. So like literally like you get to this top of the thing, you're like dying because you've been like crawling up this mountain. You don't even hardly run because it's so steep. And then you literally get on your butt. It's kind of nice because it's like a little bit of break actually, but you slide down the snow. But it's scary because the snow hits the shale. So you like might like fly into the shale and like tear your butt up or something. It's horrible. And then you run down the shale and that kind of is like, it's loose. So you kind of like accelerate down it. So it's like you're kind of flying. And then you hit this bottom section that's like kind of, you have to like climb through certain sections because it's like really like watery and sketchy. It's like, I don't know. I thought I would never do it, but I got in one year. It's like on a lottery system. And I was like, well, I'll just do it. And, you know, there's like this kind of reputation that it's too dangerous for skiers because you might like hurt yourself. And you totally could, but you also can hurt yourself doing anything. But it's very cool. I don't know where I'm going with this, but the race is very unique. Like if you ever get a chance to go to Alaska on the 4th of July, it's the coolest scene because like thousands of people come and watch. And it's just like this really fun scene just to be hanging around and watching the race, but like to then win it as well is like massive because you're just like it's just a very cool race because there's so many people cheering and it's like pretty epic. So
it's crazy. I love hearing these sort of events because you know, when you've got such a tradition and as you're saying, so many people get behind it, I just always think of when it first started. Like, how do people come up? Hey, it's in that mountain up there. Let's run up and come back down. Let's do that. And then, 50 years later, it's like this big event that everybody does.
That's what happened. Apparently, 2 guys in a bar were like, I bet you I can get up this faster than you. And no, I'm like, not joking. This is what happens.
Wow.
And they raced to the top, and now it's like an actual race. So
best things always start by a couple of people in a bar, right? Like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, sure, right? There you go.
I think so, actually, yeah.
Probably how Nordic Combined started, right? I bet you I can ski jump and then ski a lot longer than you. Okay, done. Let's do it.
Game on.
Yeah, that simple. Beijing, again, as I mentioned a couple of times now, you came away 31st in the skiathlon, which is the highest ever finish by individual athlete by an Australian at the Olympic Games. How is that to hear that? I mean, just must be something pretty special for you to come away and hold that record because, I mean, you know, you're an Australian Olympian, 2-time Olympian who holds an Australian Olympic record. So, I mean, how is that reflecting on that now 3 or 4 months removed from achieving that feat?
It's actually very special to me because I felt like I missed my mark that I wanted at this last Olympics. And in that race, like I really wanted to be top 30. And I was like in 26 at one point, and then I'm like kind of bad at sprinting. So like 4 girls passed me in the finish chute. And that was like, I literally looked up at the finish. Like I looked up at the board and I was like, really 31st? Like I was like, all I wanted was to be top 30. I'm like 31st. I was like, you're kidding me. And that was like my big goal. And so then having that achievement, I think like made it better because I was like, well, I didn't do that, but like that was pretty special for me. So I felt like for me, it is a huge achievement and I'm like really happy with the result that day. So yeah, it means a lot, I guess. And I think I only got it by one place, so I'm pretty sure Barbara had it before, or maybe she was 33rd or something. So it was
I think it was 32nd because I remember sort of going into that. There was 30 second was a couple there, which I mean, does it take, are you informed of that like pretty much straight away, or like did you know that beforehand, or how long does it take till somebody goes, oh, by the way, Jess, you created history. Sorry you didn't get top 30, but you now are a history maker.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't actually know at the time because my goal was so much so to be top 30 and I knew if I did that, I knew that would be it, but it wasn't like it was a goal. I just knew that if I skied to like the potential, or like if I got the result I wanted, it would have been that. But yeah, I didn't like think about it going into it. I was more like thinking from a personal standpoint than like, I just want to set the record or something like that. But yeah.
What was, I mean, the mood itself amongst the team? Like, one thing we talked a lot about during the games, and we talked to Casey about, was kind of, you guys always look like you're having fun. You're doing some great stuff on social media and kind of putting out some fun videos. And even throughout the games and everything, you guys just always look like you're having fun. So, I mean, is the Australian cross-country team just the fun team of the Olympics? Not to take away from all our other great teams that we had at the Olympics, but I swear the cross-country team is just, that's where the party bus is, right?
We certainly tried to be. Yeah, we actually because I did like an Instagram takeover beforehand, and we were like, all right, we're going to like make it, like we're going to make this like the coolest, like maybe it was like we're having the most fun, but we were also, we kind of do have the most fun. Like we had a really good team atmosphere. And I think COVID like really bonded us this year because we were stuck in this house together, and it was like, we can't go see anyone. Don't like talk to anyone because we can't get COVID, because we're all going to get COVID and no one's going to the Olympics. So we're all just like, all right, buckle down. So we spent a lot of time together. But it was fun, and like we do have a really good time. It's a really good atmosphere. There was not this like weird competitive thing where people are like out to get each other. Like we're all really good friends. And I mean, I've been traveling with some of these athletes for like 8 years, and so I know them very well. Like Casey and Phil, like we've been doing this for ages together. So I think, yeah, like you end up like, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't be doing it still if they were like horrible people. So, maybe that's
generally how it works. I think sometimes with these things, yeah. Hopefully, you'd want to think that way. Which, I mean, it's a question I'm sure that everyone keeps asking you. You hate getting this question so close to having finished your second Olympics. But do you look towards 2026, or is it something that you still haven't really made your mind up, and you'll kind of work that out eventually?
I'm kind of like working it out. I would love to compete, but it's like right now I am focusing on finishing up. Like I only have, I don't know, 15 weeks left or something of my physio, and then I get to like go and like get paid to do what I do and that kind of thing. So I'm trying to like get, kind of focus on that right now. So that's like the top priority, but I don't know. It's kind of like I would love to compete, and there's a high chance that I will, but then there's also a chance that I won't. So we'll just kind of see how things go.
Because it comes in that level, isn't it, where basically, because you're still quite young and sort of you're in that, I guess, age frame where cross-country skiers kind of hit their peak, right? Sort of it's late 20s, early 30s, which is generally sort of the peak for a cross-country skier.
Yeah, and that's what's tough about it is like it's like if I just started skiing really slowly, I'd probably like throw it in. But when you have like success, you're like, well, maybe I could get better. I don't know. So I think it'll just see like it'll depend on how racing goes like over the next couple of years. And like, I've definitely shifted my emphasis on my training and things like that. But if I still feel like I can ski fast and that kind of thing, like I'll go. I wouldn't say I'm the person that's just going to like, kind of like, half-ass it, I guess. Like I only really want to be skiing. Like it's not fun to do something when you're really fat, you're not reaching your potential, or you're not putting in as much effort and getting out as much as you could be. And so there's that element of it. But if I feel like, I can achieve good results and ski fast for myself, then it's like something I'll keep pursuing. So
we'll definitely be keeping an eye on how that goes. Now, Jess, we like to close out with a set of fun, get to know you style questions. But before I get to that, piano. I believe you're a bit of a piano player. What sort of do you like to play? And is this something that, have you got a YouTube channel, or like, something that you could pursue a little bit more with the piano?
No, God, no, I do not have a YouTube channel. I'm not that good. But you would, and also if you've seen some of the people that do have YouTube channels, they're quite good. But no, it's funny. I grew up playing the piano a bit, and I like didn't do it for ages. I was like forced to play piano. My mom made me play, and I was like, oh, stupid. I hate this. And then like one Halloween, I was like at a party, and I was just not really into the party, and there's a piano, and I was like, I'm going to go play it. And it was like this weird, I hadn't played piano in like 10 years. And I was just like, oh my God, this is great. And so then that started like maybe like 8 years ago or something. But since then I like went through this phase of downloading like music that I know. And so I would like go on like line and like just find songs of like sheet music of people that had like basically composed, or what do you call it? Like transposed like pop songs. But mostly this is like all turns out like all Coldplay, because I love Coldplay.
Why not?
I'm like obsessed with, but I think part of it is that they have like, they do, you know, like the older stuff, it's like a rush of blood to the head, like a lot of that's piano music. And so I think it sounds really good on the piano. And so like, I don't know, think about like The Scientist, like it's a fun one to play. So basically that's all I play now. Like if I find a piano, I'm just like, oh, I'm just gonna play some Coldplay. But I'm not
there
that
you go.
good.
Thanks,
but
Mum.
Like, some people are impressed. They're like, nice, like that's really cool. And then others are like way better. So yeah, but it's kind of a bad instrument because like traveling around a lot, like I don't have a piano. So
something you just put it to carry on.
I know. I'm like, what? It's such a, like you lug it around. Everyone's like, get a keyboard. I'm like, someone like they're, I don't know, they don't sound that good. So it's a bit
not
depressing.
the same. Yeah. Well, there you
go.
Well, just keep practicing the Coldplay. Maybe you could start up it. You could be like the masked singer. Like if you don't want to like show your face, like you could just, you know, do the masked skier.
They probably blew me off stage or whatever.
Yeah. Just like Coldplay not.
So it'd be fine.
We'll keep an eye on that too. As I said, we wrap up. So these questions, as always, are based on a Team Canada questionnaire they gave their athletes ahead of both Pyeongchang and Rio. And simply get to know you style questions there. If you feel the need, there is a drawing element. Again, it's always optional. You can draw if you want to. I believe Casey sent us a drawing. So, you know, if you're competitive with Casey.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yes. So just if you want to see if you can draw better than her. Your favorite all-time Olympic moment is?
Oh my gosh. The cyclist that won in Tokyo, the female cyclist that won the road race.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
It was freaking awesome. She just went off the front, she hammered and just dropped everyone, and it was the most badass thing I've ever seen.
And she didn't, was I not mistaken, she didn't even realize she was winning, I think? Like she kind of crossed the line?
She realized the people behind her didn't realize.
Oh, right, yeah. And they thought they were in the winning group, and then they didn't realize. Yeah, that's
and this other girl's been done for 5 minutes because you let her go because you just didn't even think that someone else had a chance at winning, and I thought that was pretty freaking cool. So good. It
must be the most insane thing to think like, oh, I'm crossing the line and winning gold. It's like, guess what? You had a silver. And you're like, what?
Guess what? You didn't win. Someone's been beating. I mean, it's like a bummer, but it's actually quite sad. But I thought it was pretty cool because, I mean, she literally like went from the line, and I'm like, that takes guts, and that's inspirational. It's cool. So
yeah, good answer. I like that. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, it would actually be the ability to fall asleep. This is so weird. You're gonna be like, this is not...
I like where this is going.
It would be the ability to turn myself off. Because I'm a really bad sleeper, and like really, really bad, and it sucks. And when you lay awake all night, it's not fun. And sometimes I just wish I could like have an on and off, and you could like set it and be like, wake up in 7 hours, and you would just like boop boop.
And like actually, when you wake up, not like have to lay there for like half an hour. Oh, like you are literally just like, I'm awake, time to get up.
Yeah, like so I could like program like a robot, and like I could just. That sounds so lame.
No, I think that's something more people should have, because I think most people, like if you could create a pill that could do that, or some sort of technology, like you would be rich, because that would be perfect. Like, no, I like that. First time I've had that answer, Jess, so good job. I like that. Your favorite ever sports movie is?
Oh, gosh. Bend It Like Beckham?
Hey, yes. That hasn't been mentioned in a while. I like that movie. Good movie.
I know, yeah.
One of Keira Knightley's very first ever movies, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. She was like 15 or something. I don't know if it's before Pirates of the Caribbean or I don't know.
It would have been. I think it was just because like she was in Star Wars Episode 1 kind of as like Natalie Portman's double, but like no one ever realized that until she became famous. So it didn't really count.
Like, but they kind of do.
Yeah, they look very similar, like I think when you kind of look at it. Anyway, good choice. I like that. Your funniest childhood memory is?
That's like really tough.
They have the very deep ones, the Canadians. They like to go right in there.
funniest. Oh my God. Okay, this isn't the funniest one, but this like applies to this podcast. My first ever cross country ski race. I literally I was terrible. I'd skied like 3 times. And I was like in last place, and like I got stuck in a snowbank because I like toppled over, like my skis like went into it, and I was like upside down. And I was like, all the people were past me, and I was like, what a dumb sport. So there you go. It's inspiration for you. This is like
very inspirational.
I was like 13. I was like, oh my God, like who, like this is horrendous. And here I am now. So
now you're a 2-time Olympian who holds an Australian record.
Know what you can achieve. People remind you of this.
There you go. Everybody listening who's hating the sport they're in right now, you too could be a 2-time Olympian and creating Australian history. What is your favourite pump-up song?
Oh. You know, I'm like a really big fan of just like Kygo, like his, but that's not like a specific song. I think to be super lame, but Remember the Name by Fort Minor, you know, it really gets going. As lame as it is, it kind of like does, like you hear it and you're like, wow, I am kind of pumped up. So.
Well, that works. They're there for a reason, right? So, hey.
No, usually like I'll play like Kygo albums, and like I just find that music very like, I'm like, yeah, I'm fired up now. So.
You're not playing your Coldplay piano music just to really get you like.
No, it doesn't really fire me up. So.
No. Do a bit of Viva La Vida, like dun 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 dun, like that sort of music. Not quite.
That kind of is. It's like a little, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit there. The most recent TV show you binge watched is.
Oh, God. Actually, The Queen's Gambit.
Yep. Okay.
But that was a while ago. I try to avoid it because I'm like, I really do binge watch. So it's like, if I'm like, I just have to like stay away because it's like once I'm in, it's all over.
And that's why you don't sleep, apparently. That's just
really bad. Yeah. So, but I did binge watch that. Like I finished it in like a day. I was like so hooked.
Wow. Good job. Your least favorite foods are?
Ooh, gosh, I actually like really like most things. Least favorite. I don't love stuff with what's that spice that's like licorice, anise seed or whatever?
Aniseed. Yeah, aniseed, yes.
Or like licorice tea. I hate licorice tea. It's disgusting. Okay. And
so just not a licorice fan?
No, I don't actually mind licorice. It's more like licorice tea. That would probably be like the number one thing. Like if you gave me a cup of tea and it has like, if you look on the ingredients, it'll have like licorice. Like sometimes Sleepy Time tea has it, and I can't drink it. It's just foul.
Wow.
But I could probably eat the licorice. So it's more like a tea thing. I don't know. It's weird.
My grandma used to have aniseed balls that she used to just eat, like these little balls of aniseed. And I'm like, that was a very interesting thing to eat. So, yeah. Interesting. If you weren't an athlete, what would you be?
Ooh, like no athlete at all. I probably would have just like immersed myself in medicine and become a doctor or something like that. Yeah.
And is that, so you're currently studying to be a physio, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think medicine was something I always like thought about, but it always like seemed like too hard with wanting to, I really like to like get out and enjoy life and exercise a lot. And I just felt like it was maybe too much because I felt like it was maybe too much of like, there's just a bit more of like also like the time commitment of like how long it would take. And I was just like, oh God, like 10 more years. Like I can't do that. but I love like the medical side of things. So yeah.
Perfect. I'm loving the honesty in this interview, Jess. It's working very well. It's kind of going that way. Your favorite vacation spot is?
Ooh, gosh, that's tough. Actually, Moab. It's in Utah. Have you heard of it?
No, I can't say I have.
In the desert. It's just, I'm like really into mountain biking, and it's like amazing mountain biking. And there's nothing I like better than like having like 4 days to go camp and basically ride my bike all day and come back and have lime corn chips and beer. And that's like,
nice.
That's my ideal day.
That's your happy place.
It has to be really sunny, and you just lay there. Oh, but then you have to be able to go for a swim too. Right. So there's no river around. It's like kind of like out for me. But other than that, Bunker Bay, which is down south in Perth, or down south of Perth, but that's like where I grew up going. Like as a kid, my family has a little place down there, and so that's like my beach location. But
Perfect.
right now, I'd rather go for a mountain bike trip. So
Got me thinking of the line chips down beer. Like that's
it's like my favorite. Yeah.
yeah, geez, that's I'm liking the sound of that.
That's it.
What's something people usually describe you as?
Oh gosh. I don't know.
Do we need to get someone on the line here right now to test this?
Probably people like just as general friends would say that like I'm like very like athletic but like I don't know. I guess it's not athletic, but that I like exercise a lot. So I don't know if that's not really a descriptor, but like, if you talk to like my friends, they'd be like, oh, Jess is just like obsessed with like running and biking and like doing things all the time.
That works. That works.
So that's probably how I'd be described.
Okay. Well, we'll do a straw poll. Any of your friends that are listening, feel free to comment to this. I asked sort of a slight question on this earlier, but I don't know if it's the same. But growing up, who was your favorite sports team?
Oh, I don't know. Gosh, it's hard because I didn't follow like a lot of I wouldn't say I follow a lot of team sports. Like I was more into following like because I was a swimmer, so I loved like that kind of stuff. Favorite sports team.
You can go back and just like, interested with a swimmer. Like, if you're following swimming and you're sort of dual American Australian, are you Thorpe or are you Phelps? Like, kind of how does that work?
Was like, I remember like growing up and being like thinking like Ian Thorpe was the greatest and things like that. Like I was more into like that aspect of it than like teams. Not so much like like I felt like I wasn't like a huge like Phelps like nuthead, but yeah, like I don't know. Yeah. It's really tough. And then I followed cycling a lot too. So there was a lot of like female cyclists. I was really like
enemies.
Well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like Kristen Armstrong, I don't know if you know who she is, but I was a big fan of her. So I don't know. I feel like more
that's an answer. We'll take that.
More to like my like who I idolized as a kid than like maybe sports teams so much. But
that works. If you could be I might know the answer to this one. If you could be an Olympian in any other sport besides your own, what would it be?
Mountain biking.
Is that something that you could transition across? Because it's sort of, I know it's sort of, particularly talking to a lot of Canadian Olympians, there's a transition, say, between speed skating and cycling. But I don't know if there's like a cross-country skiing to cycling sort of transition period that you could look into doing.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't like probably pursue that type of mountain biking, like, or like at that level, like the World Cup level. Like to me, that's like, I don't know. If I'm going to do that, it's more like I'd ski, but I want to transition to like longer bike races and like more like races around the US. And like, maybe like I've been wanting to do like more like I'm signed up for like some 50-mile races, which I guess is like, what is that? 70, 80K races, things like that. I don't know about like, I almost feel like to be really good at like World Cup mountain biking, you'd have to like train a little more specific, whereas I'm more like just out there like hammering for hours. And so maybe I'd do better on the long distance side of things. But yeah, definitely like that's something I see in my future is doing more of that kind of stuff. So we'll see.
We'll see. Last one for you, Jess. This can be anything. It just simply is my guilty pleasure is. So is there something that food, anything. Yeah, this is kind of a very open-ended question.
Lime chips and beer.
Lime chips and beer.
No.
I've already answered that one. Exactly. Yes.
Been there. I wasn't kidding. It's like, yeah, no, actually.
Simple. The two drawing aspects here. So you can draw a picture of yourself or draw a picture of one of your teammates. So.
Oh, good. Who did Casey draw?
She drew. Did she not draw an animal? Was it not? Was it hers? Was like describe yourself as an animal? Why am I thinking that?
It was, yeah, possibly. Because I don't remember her drawing a picture of herself. So.
No, I'm pretty sure it was an animal from memory. So, you're welcome to take that one as well. If you think of yourself as an animal, if there's something that, you got the inner dragon or something. I have no idea where I'm going with that. Jess, before we let you go, social media, websites, anything people can stay up to date with what you're doing in life and everything if people want to check out what you're doing?
Yeah, Instagram mostly. So just JJ Yeaton is my, I guess, at JJ Yeaton. And then I do have a blog/website. It's just my name at WordPress. But to be honest, I don't update it that much. But if I do have something really exciting, I will sometimes put it on there. The only other thing I do is I write articles for fasterskier.com sometimes. So that's more of like, you're looking, like I do some like physio contributions, like nutrition stuff and things like that. And so that's kind of like more of where I have been going with things recently. So it's kind of a cool place to check out if you're interested.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, Jess, we really appreciate you coming on, sharing your journey, giving some great answers, and we look forward to maybe seeing you in 2026, fingers crossed. And now I feel like we all just need to just enjoy some lime chips and beer, because I think that's how this interview just ended, basically.
Yeah, and just think of me, yeah.